Third time is the charm for our booking. Coming up at light heavyweight, we have Atomic Alonzo Menifield taking on the Knightmare William Knight. This is a fight that was originally scheduled back in February on the 27th. Menifield out of that one. Then it was booked on March 27th, and the Knight's out of that one. And then ultimately, we finally get the fight here coming up in December. Now, since then, you look at the fights for these guys. You got William Knight in 2021 losing to Daoun Jung and looking awful in that fight. He got dominated in areas where you thought, hey, William Knight's a decent wrestler. Not against Daoun Jung, he's not. And he lost that fight handily. Then he roars back his last time out, gets a finish win over Fabio Cherant. For Alonzo Menifield, he was the hotness and the heat at 205. He was that next prospect that was supposed to break through. And then he fought Devin Clark, and it was a close enough fight. He didn't do great with his wrestling, but when there were striking exchanges, he definitely did a lion's share of the work. And then he goes out there and fights Ovince St. Preux, and he had a little bit of success, but he got kind of caught following Ovince St. Preux. Got caught by one of those crazy shots that OSP can throw. So he had to kind of rebuild himself, let's say it that way. He goes out, fights Fabio Cherant, and somehow through the knockout loss to OSP, absorbed his Von Flue powers, and he Von Flue Cherant, had him up against the cage where you don't want to be with Cherant, because he's great with defensive submissions. Then he gets him down, then he gets him choked up, and in his last fight, he ends up fighting Ed Herman, where he looked great in that fight, and he put on an amazing pace against the guy that's always steady, Eddie, and is always there, especially even in the third round. Menifield looked like a totally different guy in that fight and had really good volume in that one, too.
And you know how when you talk about future champions, we normally talk about them beating guys like Fabio Cherant, and we get really excited about those kind of wins.
They both beat Fabio.
That's what I mean. And I don't give a shit if I'm being honest. Like, Fabio Cherant's not a great UFC fighter, if we're being completely honest.
He's only had 2 tries.
And neither one were all that. Like, okay, if you have 2 tries hitting a ball off a tee, and you miss by like 9 feet both those tries, I don't care. You struck out after 2 strikes.
It's like hitting a medicine ball, though. Like, it's going to be tough.
This is my thing with Alonzo Menifield and William Knight. They both seem to be on the cusp of being top 15 fighters in their division or at the light heavyweight division. But in light heavyweight, it just feels like the ranked fighters seem to be a lot further ahead than the unranked fighters. Like, every unranked light heavyweight to me honestly feels like they're on the exact same level, and then it seems to be quite the big step up once you get in the rankings. Like, with some divisions, it's okay. The top 5 seems to have kind of set themselves apart from the rest. With the light heavyweight division, more than any other, it really does feel like to me that the ranked fighters have somewhat separated themselves, because guys like Volk and Oezdemir are barely in the rankings, and then you look and I'll be honest, I think Oezdemir would beat both these guys quite comfortably just because he is much more technical. The interesting thing about this fight is that Menifield has had success against some top-level guys, but he has found ways to lose in the past, and the OSP fight really is the perfect example of it, because he's moving forward, he's throwing good combinations, he's doing all those things you really like Alonzo Menifield, or at least you like from his game, but, like you had said, he just decides, oh, what if I stop cutting the cage off and just rush forward? And the one time he does decide to make that mistake, it does ultimately cost him, and that's the thing with Menifield. I don't think he has a bad chin by any means, but his striking defense is quite open. And when he does really allow his own hands to start opening up, that's when he can get caught. And that's going to be a really interesting point in this fight, because I think Menifield's got the better cardio than William Knight. I think he's the more positionally aware fighter than Knight. But I think the fact that he holds his chin extremely high in the air is a massive liability when you're fighting a guy like Knight, who is known for his massive power shots around the guard. And that really is the thing about Knight that you have to focus on. Yes, he can get taken down. Yes, he has some openings in his own game. But what is the perfect William Knight game plan? It was like my point with Joanne Calderwood the other week. Like, okay, the perfect Calderwood game plan still probably results in her winning a split decision. With William Knight, what's his perfect game plan? I'm going to do like the Tyron Woodley blitz forward and try to get you with one of those overhand shots. If he does that against Alonzo Menifield, he very well could catch him early on in the fight, just because Menifield does have that, I'll just kind of move backward with my chin up sort of striking defense, and that worries me in a matchup against Knight.
And I look at this one, I mean, for Knight, he's a guy... Now, listen, I'm going to say something that I don't normally say, but I'm going to go there. Look at his Instagram. Are we looking at any training videos? Not a one. Now, that could be by design, because you don't want to show what you're training for. You don't want to show, hey, listen, I've got the wrestling shoes on today. I'm trying to stuff all
Max
the takedown
Holloway
tests.
just posts Call of Duty highlights.
Yeah, William Knight posts strength and conditioning videos. And I will say, that Jake Matthews is doing the same thing before he's fighting Jeremiah Wells. So it's not completely lost on me, but...
It looks like it's working, though.
That's all he's doing. And for Alonzo Menifield, you're getting to see the quality of training partners that he has at Fortis MMA, especially in some of the higher weight classes, including somebody that's also in this division that didn't win his last fight, but Kennedy Nzechukwu, I mean, he's there. There are a lot of good guys in the higher weight classes there at Fortis. So when I look at this fight... Yes, this is a coin flip, and I much prefer if there's like an under 2.5 rounds type of line for this one. I'd be cool with it. Menifield open a minus 140 favorite. He's roughly a minus 171 right now. For William Knight, open a plus 110. He's at a plus 141 underdog. If we look at the Tapology votes, surprise to us as they are to you. 1,124 total votes, 66% Menifield, 63% have him to win by knockout. For the 34% that have Knight, 77% have him to win by knockout. Matt, you laid out a game plan for William Knight, but let's hear one for Alonzo Menifield because this guy is not here by accident.
No, and my prediction is going to be Alonzo Menifield, by the way, so I guess I'll set up how I think he's going to win. With Knight, it is going to be a lot of those big actions throughout the fight that's going to get him the win. Like, if he wins, it's probably going to be by finish, because I don't think he's at least consistent enough throughout 15 minutes to match the pace of a guy like Menifield, because we can talk or at least knock a lot of the skills of Menifield, but what is he good at? Well, he does have a good clinch game, he does throw in combination, he does have decent cardio at the division. Like, he can at least keep a sustained pace throughout 15 minutes, and that's going to be a really big key throughout this fight. And the last thing I will say, I remember when Devin Clark fought Menifield, we were really focused on how Devin Clark throws the leg kick and how good his leg kicks are. Alonzo Menifield was actually really successful with his own leg kicks in that matchup, and I think they're going to be really important in this one too, because if he can chop down that lead leg of William Knight and take away some of the footwork and some of that explosion, it's going to make dealing with his power punches a lot easier for Menifield. So I guess the disclaimer will be, if Menifield can keep himself away from those two black lines, or at least keep himself from being backed up behind those two black lines, I think he'll be able to get the win. Just, he's the more consistent guy. Now, could it be one of those fights where he wins the first 9 minutes quite convincingly and then eats a big shot like Miguel Baeza, Chaos Williams style, like coming out of the clinch? Yes, that could happen, but I'm still going to go with the guy who I think is going to be more consistent.
I like Menifield with kicks too, and that's the thing. I mean, for Knight, he's a guy he eats them and eats them and eats them, and then he starts shaking his head no, and they don't affect him.
He doesn't have a good response to them, exactly.
You can come right out of it and knock out a guy like Sharon, and it's like, oh, everything's forgotten. What's the big difference? I mean, listen, this guy has insane power when he decides to use it, and when he's offensively wrestling and things are in his domain, he does a great job of that too. Like, these guys are very, very talented fighters. The last thing I have to say, these are some of the oldest prospects you're going to find in MMA. And, you'd think, oh, well, they must be heavyweights if they're prospects and they're 34 and 33 years old, respectively. No, it's light heavyweight. We're close enough. We're almost there. And you might see these guys at heavyweight one day. For me, I like Menifield, but ever so slightly. So for me, I stay away from it. It's pop and popcorn, but I do have Menifield here.
I'm going to say this. I think this is the battle of the two best nicknames on the card. I think Atomic's a pretty good nickname, and I think the Knightmare is too if your name's William Knight, so there you go.
Big time fights coming up on this card. We're both going with Alonzo Menifield. You like nicknames. Azamat taking on Quake in the all-action co-main event at lightweight that you're not going to want to miss, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.